Episode 67, January the 5th, 2021. This is your host, Sree Iyer. I am with Sridhar Chityalaji and welcome to Global Daily Insights. Namaskaram, sir. How are you?
Namaskaram and good morning to you. Good morning to everybody, and good evening to everybody in India and other parts of the world, or good afternoon to those in Europe.
We are going to start with some rapid developments that are taking place in the United States elections. To start off, there is a fifth option that is in front of Mike Pence. Perhaps, Sridharji, you can explain to our viewers what that fifth option is of what Mike Pence can do tomorrow, sir.
I think Mike Pence, once he hears the objections, which is now almost eminent or imminent, both on the House and the Senate side, and once all the sessions are complete and once he has heard, it's conceivable that he can exercise a constitutional option of sending the votes back to the respective legislatures and ask them to recertify the results in the event that the motion of is defeated, motion here being that the contesting of the elections is defeated. Then there is an option which the five battleground states, I think six battleground states, had exercised, which is namely that in these kinds of circumstances, that their vote should be counted, not the certified results from the state. So he can exercise this. Before I begin to look at that option, he can say, would the states like to? The states are all in session, by the way. They don't need to be convened. The states are all in session. So would the states like to recertify the results and send it back? So that's a potential kind of a scenario that he has. Whether he exercises that choice, which again seems to be a reasonable choice for those who are contesting, unreasonable for those who believe this is all over. And there's always a voice of dissent and there's a voice of acceptance. So the voice of acceptance is Biden, but now it has come to Mike Pence to make the decision. Remember that there's been a lot of contention around what Mike Pence should do and should not do. So this is one option that he has.
The other interesting development is that in Wisconsin, there is a news item that is coming out that on Thursday, the Wisconsin legislature is going to vote, and this is going to be a resolution that they're going to be introduced, which will likely decertify the state and award it to President Trump. So, you looking at what you just said about Mike Pence sending it back. See, today is the Tuesday, the 5th. Tomorrow is Wednesday, right? And let's say Mike Pence decides to send it back to the states. You can see that Wisconsin is getting ready to do something. So what do you make of this? So this is a tremendously new development that nobody had foreseen.
I think we have consistently maintained, notwithstanding some of the adversarial comments, albeit maybe sporadic 2, 3, 4 people making comments in our kind of responses in the comment section, that this has been a contentious election. Many have been in denial mode. Just to make one thing clear, Mr. Biden himself has not commented. This is in press reports. You can look at any of the press reports. Mr. Biden himself has not commented anything about Trump's moves to reclaim the presidency using this type of process. He has not. He has only said, move on. I am the contender and I am the incumbent, and I would like to do it. So what you are now witnessing is, as the evidence begins to grow, Wisconsin has now, just breaking news, coming up with this legislation, or coming up with what they call order of business, listed in the order of business you can go to wisconsin.gov and take a look, which is to say potential decertification of the previous result and nominating President Trump as the winner from the Wisconsin state. It seems to be the agenda item, at least one of the news sites is reporting. What does that mean? Well, there is a constitutional thing, which is namely, for anything that is to be counted, they only have time till tomorrow, which is by late this evening. They have to send, if they have any issues or recertification or decertification, etc., they need to send it by January 6th, which is what we had indicated. But having said that, this election is so contentious, almost every facet of the constitutional clauses is going to be looked at and analyzed to make sure that whatever is, because remember, one thing is we have to be very clear that the only body other than the vice president who presides over what he does in the joint houses on January 6th, the only body which can certify and send the result is the state legislature. So most of the cases, this is where people are getting, hung up. Most of the cases has been registered either on decline, either on procedural issues, or the courts are saying, at least the Supreme Court, okay, forget the state courts, which seems to have taken political kind of postures depending on who is the judge in the specific court. The Supreme Court is saying, do not make Supreme Court responsible for the conduct of the election, and that responsibility constitutionally only sits with the legislature. Constitution is very clear. Legislature is the only body which can enact laws, which can conduct the elections, which can certify the results and send it. This is not Supreme Court's responsibility. So I think they've been very clear, and this is where people have mistaken, which is to state that President Trump has lost 49 out of the 50 cases. By the way, if tomorrow Trump gets elected, overturning, remember, Biden cannot go back to the same courts and say, overturn for me. You have overturned 49 times for Trump, so if you go the 50th time, you will also be overturned. So they have created a precedence, which is to state, okay, all the cases are gone, right? Biden has no recourse to go back, and he has to only go back to the state legislatures, which has either rectified or reassessed and said, this is my final decision in terms of where I'm going.
Yes, indeed. And Wisconsin's move is significant in the face of the data that we submitted about what happened in just one county, the Antrim County, where the EVMs, upon repeated testing at various dates, produced different results, and a manual recount gave that particular county to Donald Trump. So this is a very, very interesting development. It is likely that other states might also convene on Thursday. So this kind of tells you the path down which Mike Pence might be heading. So we'll have to wait and see. But be that as it may, it's very, very, very interesting times here. Sridharji, today there are the Georgia Senate races that is happening today. What do you think the significance of that is going to be? I think that is a separate thread, isn't it? That is just going to determine what is the situation or the position of Democrats and Republicans are going to be in the Senate, right?
Correct. So we'll just break away for a minute to that strand of what you call thought process as well as the issues, and then we'll come back into what's going to happen on January 6th. As far as the significance of the Georgia elections is very profound and impactful, irrespective of who the president is, because the Senate is effectively their final decision-making body on a number of items. So historically, you have had either most of the decisions they try to get it through Senate, right? So therefore, Senate is an important vehicle. Historically, the Republicans have controlled the Senate and managed to be a deterrent in making sure that the at least pro-conservative agenda is adhered to. The case in point here is the $600 versus $2,000. So the entire election campaign is being run on basically three themes. One, this is about the future of America. This is about the progressive agenda. This is about getting $2,000 versus not getting $2,000. This is about pro-immigration or pro certain policies. So therefore, this is all about the agenda around what they call the progressive policy. The word progressive itself has emerged more and more recently, And you can say the progressive agenda is the point of contention in the Senate election, the 2 seats. They're saying this is what decides, otherwise our agenda will be defeated, despite having a president and despite having a house.
So let's take a quick look at what is being talked about by ex-president President Obama about this, the battle between progressives and conservatives. And he has been espousing this. Perhaps one of the unusual things about this election is that he's the only one who's been actively campaigning. There are many living ex-presidents. None of the others have ventured into the battlefield. So it seems strange that one person should be holding the torch and trying to get Biden elected. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, it's fascinating. I think it's a great question that you have asked. I actually wrote in one of my private blogs, which is to say, this seems to be an election between President Obama 3 and President Trump. It's almost like between the two people. You have never seen such active engagement of an ex-president against a sitting president who is an incumbent in the election. Never. Now, just coming to the Georgia election, I don't have a copy of the email, but when we extract it, we'll share it and we'll put it up. But I've seen the anecdotal quotes, which is to say, President Obama is raising campaign money for Democrats in the state of Georgia. And one of the sentences that states very clearly the policy and the thinking behind Obama, which says, for the sake of the progressive agenda. This is about progressive agenda, which is about taxes, which is about immigration, which is about the general welfare policies. This election, the runoff has to be won by the Democratic Party. Otherwise, the progressive agenda is at threat. We have come this far and we have to win. So please contribute $25, minimum $25, whatever is, you can contribute. I think the number 25 I saw in the quote, so therefore that's why I'm stating that. I could be wrong, but that number is visible to me. So I wrote, which is to say that this sounds very highly unusual for a sitting president to go, for an ex-president to go this far against a sitting president, right? You've never seen, a George Bush, you campaign about policies, you come and go. But to come and say that the progressive agenda, now who are the people who are behind this progressive agenda is fascinating. Okay, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's progressive. She's likely to contest against Chuck Schumer. Who is the other person? The other person is Warren, right? Formation of unions. We are going to have union in Google. Have you ever thought about Google in Silicon Valley? Union, 300 people forming a union in Google, and Warren saying, I salute that the formation of union in Google, unheard of. But this is what they mean by progressive agenda, which is to say unionization, welfare, okay, and more welfare, and more kind of socialistic policies. So what is here is at stake. That's why we call it as Battle for America. Is, are we going towards complete socialism, or are we going towards we haven't even discussed the new budget that Biden is contemplating, or Obama has put together for Biden. The budget which is likely to be. If you look at the taxes and if you look at some of the pork belly stuff that they've laid out, it's another $5-6 trillion, at least $5 trillion when you add the numbers that is to be added to the total debt. So therefore, this election, sir, is about that to conclude.
And putting aside $2 trillion to recover from a pandemic is one thing, but just on indiscriminately attaching things is one thing completely different. And from what the early leads suggest, Georgia could very well flip to Democrats, which means that there is going to be a challenge, but let's hope that it doesn't happen. It's a very, very close race. It is on a knife's edge. It depends upon the turnout. If the GOP is able to mobilize its forces, and if every Republican in Georgia goes and casts his or her vote. It could be a very close race, but this is how is you're going to see, and it is an indication of how America's politics are going to be from here on. And I'm not sure that many Americans are used to what is going to play out. In fact, I don't know what to tell. All these social media companies were gung-ho about suppressing news and taking on this progressive agenda, and like a serpent, it is coming back to bite them. What do you think about that, sir?
Well, I'll give you a completely different contrarian example, right? And to make my point. And if people, let's take the case of Jack Ma. Okay? Jack Ma comes from China with a CCP kind of a mindset, right? He came in, he went in, entrepreneurial zeal. He formed Alibaba, he formed Ant Financial. Everybody in the United States said, rah, rah, rah. Is disappeared. And there is no from institutional investors, there's nothing from the tech, there's nothing from the business, there's nothing from politics, there's nothing from his own alma mater. It just reflects the mindset. This is within United States. The only guy who has made statement is Secretary Pompeo, who said this is another example of the types of policies that the China embraces, which is against the values that we follow in United States. This is no different to Tiananmen Square. Those were his exact words last night. Okay, what is the contra view of all these companies that you mentioned? Have you seen anything coming out of Silicon Valley? We need to know where Jack Ma is, right? If it is about fiscal issues and if it is about regulatory that you want to take over and you want to take over Alibaba, great. But why should the person disappear? None, right? So that reflects this two distinctly different set of policies and thought processes that characterize the choices that one makes in this particular election.
Yes, indeed. And let's go and take a quick look back at the battle for America. So tomorrow it is expected that at least 100 congressmen from the Republican Party are going to question it in the House. And we know for a fact that one senator at least is going to be standing up in the Senate and also disputing the Electoral College votes, right? So is there anything else that is going to be discussed? Like, for example, sir, President Trump said he will submit evidence. Who would be doing that, in your opinion? I'm not sure how this is going to play out. This is new territory, so I'm just curious.
It's a $1 billion question. So let me get to answer your first part, and then I'll come to the second part. The first part of the question is that we had Mo Brooks, who is leading this effort from the House. He says 100 House representatives are very clear. All 5 states, they're going to object. There's all 5 representative state members within the House from the Republican side who are raising this issue around the transparency of the elections, blah, 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 right? From the Republican side, there was this Ted Cruz-led effort, Jim Jordan, Josh Hawley, and Josh has been the most outspoken, in terms of he's the guy who filed case against the Mike Pence and saying he should not violate from his constitutional principles and therefore he should not be restrained from his constitutional principle to make the choices, right? So he made that statement. So now to come back to the question, so what would be the case? There was questions around who will represent, these 5 states, right? There's one representative from Pennsylvania, right? So that's clear. So what about the other 5 battleground states? This was a question. So yesterday, I think after their internal kind of discussions in the Senate, by the way, 25 members of the Senate from the Republican Party, at least 25, right, which includes the leadership, they have stated that they are not going to object to the elections. Very important point to remember, right? They are not going to object to the elections, right? What will happen when each of these states begin to put a smudge on them to say we are decertifying and certifying begs a question as to what happens to the leadership team in the Senate. That's a different discussion. But to get back to the point, Jim Jordan came out of that meeting and announced in very clear and specific terms, we have 2 objectives. objective number one is to communicate to the American people. There's only state legislatures, and only state legislatures are constitutionally allowed to frame rules, conduct the elections, and certify the elections. It is not the responsibility of the executive or the judicial branch in each of the state. We're going to point out in each state how the judicial and executive overreach violated the constitutional norm, in each of the 6 states. We're going to point out. So the American people are made aware. So that's number one goal. Number two is everybody say there's no fraud, everything is certified, everything is gung-ho. Okay, if people walked in, they wheeled in the suitcases, so that they can take their pillows out and sleep on those tables, right? Nothing was there. If a pipe burst, the pipe burst because somebody went. So it's all kind of, nonsense. If 438,000 votes were not kind of digitally accounted for, it's an accounting issue, we'll take care of it. So nothing, there's no fraud, right? So for those people, they want to establish there was a fraud, okay? Now, how exactly they'll present that evidence, we don't know, but they say they want to tell them that there is a fraud on 3 things. 1, duplicate votes. 2, certification of these votes and auditing. And 3, in the counting itself, there was this pattern of switching that one saw. So he was very clear. He says there are 3 things. 1 is the duplicate votes. Number 2 is the certification process, which was not followed, the audit process. And number 3 is the pattern of switching that took place. These are 3 things that we want to point out. How exactly they'll present the evidence, we don't know. But these are the 2 objectives of the Senate, to point out to United States, American people, that this is the battle for America and this is what we are fighting. Because if this is created as a precedent, then without contest, we would have probably diluted what is a constitutional validity of the whole election process and system in this country. That is the objective of the Senate.
Viewers, we are running out of time, so we're just going to skip over the global news items. You can see that, Rouhani has said Trump will be dead in a few days. Iran is accelerating uranium enrichment. South Korea is flagging some things. Taiwan is finding some activity going on. Briefly, maybe you can touch upon Taiwan, what they have seen on the Formosa, South China Sea and Formosa Straits, sir.
Well, I think that we covered at length about the significance of the Taiwan Straits, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
You saw that after our session, by coincidence, the U.S. Aircraft carriers went through the second passage through what they call as a median line. The Taiwanese government is reporting overnight that they had no less than more than 350 incursions just in the last 30 days. In the last 12 months or so, they have had more than 2,300 incursions, some number which is close to that. That has actually cost the Taiwanese government close to $800 million in terms of scrambling its defenses and preserving and protecting its independence, right? And its sovereignty and independence is under threat. So therefore, it has cost them that money. So Taiwan remains the front and center. There's a number of issues on the global side. We don't have the time. That's a separate topic by itself. There's lots of things that happened in the last 24 hours. But just to kind of to close out, that's the Taiwanese issue.
Yes, and Sri Lanka U.S. has withdrawn or yanked its aid to Sri Lanka amounting to $480 million because of some developments regarding China. We're going to cover that in the next few days. Today we are out of time on that one. On COVID, remember viewers that we had predicted that Boris Johnson will not be going for the Republic Day function celebrations, I think at least a week ago. So please remember that we are at the forefront. We are the tip of the spear in terms of giving you news that is accurate and factual. Do not go by some of these snarky comments that people put on our website. We are truly democratic. We welcome all points of view. As long as somebody rebuts us with facts, we welcome them with open arms, and we will provide you the facts from our side. That is fine. So let's move on, sir. On COVID, there is an interesting story going on in the state of New York. Andrew Cuomo is now blaming the hospitals. I mean, he seems to be playing the blame game. I mean, he's out trumping Trump.
Well, first, he's a great presidential candidate to represent the Democratic Party and the liberal agenda. First, he blamed Trump because it's all politics and Trump is not following. He has kind of, led. So he went on his tirade first. Second, he went on the tirade. We have we don't have adequate PCRs and, masks and so on. I'm going to get it. So when the cruise line, a big healthcare ship landed in New York, port of New York, he imported huge masks from China, right? He did that. Now, then he went on to say that we have been denied, number of vaccines. Okay, so fine. So then Trump said, no, no state has been denied. It's what you want is being given on a pro rata proportionate basis. Now he has released a statement, which is now yesterday states that, hey, the slowness of the implementation of vaccination in the state of New York is because the hospitals are not cooperating. Okay, so this is his statement. Then he further went on to say, we are now imposing a specific public law, and those who are not going to follow this public law, we will be passing this in the legislature. The state has the right to detain them. State has the right to detain them. So it is a very interesting game that is going on. What is most astonishing is two pictures that caught our attention. One, you had Wuhan, which is the epicenter of this virus, hundreds of thousands of people or hundreds of people celebrating the New Year Eve and New Year. And we had almost empty Times Square. In my recent memory, I've never seen an empty Times Square on a New Year Eve, except for the ball drop. Everything else was empty, except de Blasio having a great party somewhere. Okay, so who is the mayor of New York? So therefore, that is a reflection of the state in terms of how we have mismanaged COVID in this state.
Sir, finally, let's look at the markets. And this is a very fascinating thing that has been playing out. A few days back, the United States government had determined that it was going to delist 3 China Telecom stocks. And then in an abrupt volte-face, we read now that NYSE has stopped that. Now, this kind of a whiplash in the market, if someone knew a priori that this was going to happen, they could have made a killing. What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, I think the NYSE released a statement, this again an overnight, which is namely to state that they spoke with the Office of Foreign Assets and Control, and who said, they have, this is a political decision, so therefore they have no objections. So immediately they reversed the decision. These stocks went up in the Hong Kong market when they found this. So again, I tweeted both Ms. Secretary Pompeo, NYSE and CNBC, which reported the news, which is to say, do we have one country and two policies, right? So therefore, we have one country, which is the United States. So you have a presidential executive order which says these companies colluded with the companies which is associated with PLA, which has a security issue. Remember, all these are telecom companies. Okay, all these are telecom companies, not anybody else. Lo and behold, the Office of the Foreign, which is under the Treasury, basically says there's no issue. And you have, this is a major market decision and done with almost disdain. And it also reflects the gap in a transition phase where the political agenda takes charge over national agenda. This was done, albeit political, by a sitting president elected through an action. And then you have some department which says, I ignore it. And this is the price of democracy. This will not happen in China. The price of democracy is Anybody can do anything and get away with it with no accountability.
With that, we bring our program to a close today. We're going to have a very interesting session tomorrow. And the next few days are going to be absolutely fascinating. Edge of the seat thriller as this plays out. The last word about the US presidency has not been said. And please, thanks for following PGurus. Do subscribe to our channel and do consider donating to our cause. We are completely reliant on your funding and your generosity to keep this program going. Sridharji, as always, a pleasure to talk with you, sir. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Namaskar.
Namaskar, and thank you so much, sir.